Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Washington. The Occupy Wall Street is beginning to receive national attention. It's right across the country. People are in motion. And one of the places there seems to be some of the most action is the state of California. Everyone from nurses to postal workers to farmers have been hitting the streets or on strike. Now joining us to talk about what's going on in California is Norman Solomon. Norman's a progressive Democrat. He's running for the U.S. Congress in California's new coastal district, extending from the Golden Gate Bridge to the Oregon border. Norman was one of the founders of the Institute for Public Accuracy. He's been associated with FAIR for a long time, and he's also the national co-chair of Healthcare Not Warfare campaign. Thanks for joining us, Norman.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks, Paul.
So give us a picture overview of what's going on in California now.
Well, I think that the continued really high unemployment in California, up into double digits, 12 and beyond officially, which understates the extent of the unemployment problem, has really been a great source of distress, as in so many places in the country. I think the fact that it's been so protracted and high in California has really stirred up just so much discontent. And of course, political activism is the appropriate response when people see that corporations are posting record profits while workers are losing their jobs, take-backs of basic benefits that have been hard-won over a period of years and decades, and also unions that are under assault in California. So the anger is, I think, often not being used to the extent it needs to be, but there is a lot of good organizing and a lot of good union activity.
Brett, let's start with the nurses. They were on strike for a day. The nurses have also nationally been organizing in terms of some issues. In fact, the Wall Street transaction tax. Tell us a bit about the nurses' story.
Well, the state of California is blessed with the California Nurses Association, which is very politically astute and active in the macro. It was responsible to a large degree to challenging someone that they dubbed Queen Meg Whitman, and helped to really bring down her campaign for governor in the state last year. And the California Nurses Association has really been challenging some of the bulwarks of the medical industrial complex, you might say. Conceptually, very important in continuing to fight for single-payer guaranteed health care for all. Full disclosure, I'm co-chair of the Healthcare Not Warfare campaign with Donna Smith of the California Nurses Association, who many people will remember from Michael Moore's film Sicko, and also Congressman John Conyers. So CNA as a union has for a long time been very clear about the need to get beyond these sort of band-aid approaches to a basically wounded and very ill healthcare system, non-system that provides record profits often for hospital, pharmaceutical, and insurance industries. Clear that we need guaranteed health care for all, also known as single payer, and enhanced Medicare, I should say. There's a debate now on, is the Medicare age the right age for eligibility? Some even Democrats saying, oh, it should be raised a couple of years up to 67. I am for changing the eligibility of Medicare down to 0. Everybody should have it. But CNA not only has been fighting for single-payer health care, but also on the job defending really nurses and all patients. And so a couple of weeks ago, I was really thrilled to be on the picket line with nurses as part of a one-day regional state stoppage.
Yeah, what was that about? Why were they on strike for a day?
Really a long litany of very important reasons, ranging from cutbacks in health care for the nurses themselves to ways in which nurses are being prevented from taking care of their patients. And so the net effect is that there's all sorts of takebacks from the managements of Kaiser and the facility that I was involved in picketing, the Novato Community Hospital, owned by this huge conglomerate called Sutter Health Corporation. The nurses were out there, and this strike as a whole was saying, look, when you take away the healthcare benefits of nurses, when you take away their autonomy on the job to determine what's good for the patient, and instead you bring in management not only to cut back on the benefits for the nurses, but also to tell the nurses to get out of the way so that the bean counters can reduce the level of care and quality of care for the patients, then you see, I think, the way in which union rights and patient rights are really one and the same. And a lot of times management and the media try to separate those out and say, well, it's a matter of the nurses are trying to get X or the well-being of the patients. Ultimately, I think it's profoundly true in this case, but also a big metaphor that the well-being of the public and the well-being of working people, it's really one and the same.
Now, the other thing that's going on in California is farm workers as well. There was, if I understand it correctly, a Bill of Rights that was supposed to be, that in fact, I guess was passed. And then what happened? Jerry Brown vetoed it? Do I understand that?
After many, many years of organizing, of election work, of protests, the United Farm Workers and their allies were able to get passage in the California legislature, a bill to bring some justice to the fields. And to digress for a moment, our campaign for Congress in the district, we did a Solomon for Congress campaign rally a few weeks ago in Petaluma, California, and along with myself, Sean Penn was a speaker there, and Casimiro Alvarez, the Northern California political director for the United Farm Workers. And something I said there I want to say now, which is that I love a glass of wine as much as anybody else. But there's no glass of wine that is delicious enough to wash away the bitterness of the taste of injustice in the field. We have so many farm workers who are suffering out in the fields. They have a right to form a union, and this legislation, which went to the governor's desk in California, was essentially giving farm workers at long last the rights that they should always have, which is to be able to form a union without being subjected to all sorts of intimidation processes by the growers and big agribusiness.
So what is this? Jerry Brown was supposed to be a sort of left-of-center Democratic Party representative, and he vetoes the Farmer Rights Bill.
Yeah, and it was all the more ironic and terrible because when Jerry Brown was governor a few decades ago, he was seen as, and was really an ally of farm workers. But in vetoing this new measure here in the late summer of 2011, he just prattled off some nonsense about he didn't think it was balanced and so forth. Frankly, he was deferring to agribusiness. And like many, many people in the state and around the country, I was outraged and remain outraged that Governor Brown in California would veto this farm worker rights bill. So I joined with many, many thousands of farm workers and others marching on the state capitol in Sacramento. It was very inspiring.
Well, how is this, or has it split the Democratic Party in California? Because if the legislation got passed through the state legislature, then a majority of state Democrats supported it. What is their attitude now to their governor?
Well, that's sort of a parable for a lot of the dynamics that unfortunately happened in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. This farm worker rights bill passed because of overwhelming support by Democrats in the legislature. And once the Democratic governor vetoed it, you had certainly some expressions of misgivings and unhappiness, but not really full-throated protest from a lot of those elected officials in the legislature. I think that it's unfortunately a dynamic that is all too prevalent and has to change. And as a progressive Democrat, I'm glad to say that I've been up and down the district denouncing the veto and saying that we've got to effectuate, if that's one way to put it, I suppose, our solidarity with farm workers and working people generally beyond just usual check the box, I voted correctly, and that's the end of it. We have to push back when elected officials of any party are part of this anti-union drive.
All right, thanks very much for joining us, Norman.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.